Welcome to the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast. I'm Dale Corpus, a senior transition specialist and real estate expert based in the San Francisco Bay Area and a proud member of the sandwich generation. This show is all about helping families navigate the complex world of senior living, real estate, caregiving, and aging with dignity. Whether you're helping a parent transition or preparing for your own future, you're in the right place. Today, I'm joined by a truly unique and powerful advocate in the Medicare space, Julie Mason, the founder of Mason Medicare Advocates. Julie is not a licensed broker or agent, and that's exactly what makes her work so important. She's a board-certified patient advocate with over 36 years of experience, including 2 decades working at CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Julie doesn't earn commissions, isn't tied to any specific insurance company, and works solely on behalf of her clients, providing honest, unbiased Medicare guidance. Her mission is to educate, advocate, and support seniors and their families through plan selection, appeals, and navigating tricky Medicare situations with confidence. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by Medicare options or doubted whether the advice you're getting is truly in your best interest, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast, where we help families navigate senior living, real estate, and everything in between. Hosted by Senior Transition Specialist Dale Corpus, this show brings you expert insights, real solutions, and stress-free strategies to make senior transitions simple. Ready to dive in? Let's go.
And we're back, everybody. Julie, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Dale.
Well, I'm glad that I found you on LinkedIn. Actually, I initially found you on ChatGPT, which led me to this episode today. So thanks to technology, I've always wanted to bring on a Medicare specialist, and here we are. I wanted to first ask you, what inspired you to leave CMS and launch Mason Medicare Advocates?
Yeah, well, good question. I really enjoyed my 20 years with the federal government, with the Medicare agency itself, and learned so much about the program there. But after 20 years, I was ready for a change, and I didn't jump immediately working for the Medicare agency into doing my advocacy work. The intervening 15 years, I worked in consulting with Medicare Advantage plans, trying to help them get into or stay into compliance with the vast number of Medicare rules. So I did that for about 15 years. And then as my friends and family and other associates started aging into Medicare, they would come to me with a lot of questions because they were all very confused. And it dawned on me that there are probably many more people out there that could really use some expert Medicare help as they enter the Medicare program, and then once they're in it and they have problems. And so that's what inspired me to start Mason Medicare Advocates. And it's been a wonderful journey. I love working with Medicare beneficiaries and being able to help them with something that they find very confusing and confounding.
Got it. Now, as I said earlier on when I spoke out your bio, I know you're not an insurance broker or anything like that. So how does being an independent advocate differ from working with brokers or insurers?
Yeah, great question. So with a broker or an agent, their primary purpose is to first explain Medicare to you and then let you know what your options are and help you with those choices. You generally there are 2 paths to Medicare. So you can either join a Medicare Advantage plan or you can stay in the original Medicare program and usually purchase a Medicare supplement or Medigap plan and a Part D plan if you have prescription drugs. So their sole purpose is to help you through that process of understanding your options, helping you choose a plan, and then getting you enrolled. But with an agent, and I do that work as well, but here's where we differ.
Okay.
Agents and brokers can only sell you plans, whether it's a Medicare Part D plan, a Medicare Advantage plan, or a Medicare supplement plan, that they are what's called appointed with, meaning they have a contract with a particular health plan. And many, if not most, agents or brokers have that contract with a number of plans, but very rarely do they have contracts with all the plans available in an area for a Medicare beneficiary. So when you speak to them, they're limiting you to the plans that they represent. So that's one issue. Whereas I'm not an agent or a broker, so I can show you and present to you all the options that are available to you. And another difference is that they are getting commissions from those health plans that they sell. And so there is a financial incentive. And the vast majority of brokers and agents are honest and have integrity and are not going to be swayed by that. But there's been a lot of press about how some are not. And some may try to push a plan that maybe pays a higher commission, but might not be the best choice for the beneficiary. And again, the vast majority of agents and brokers are wonderful people. They really want to help their clients and they do the right thing. But it's sometimes hard to know who you're dealing with and which side of that divide are they on. So there's quite a bit of difference between how we operate. I work directly for my clients. They pay me as a consultant.
Okay.
So although with an agent or broker, it doesn't cost anything to use them and to enroll in a plan. Whereas for me, it does cost money. As I said, I charge as a consultant. But I want to differentiate the difference there. If you use an agent or broker and they do not present to you the best plan for your particular situation, down the road, that could end up costing you. You could end up being in a plan where you have higher coinsurance and copayments, for example. There may be benefits you need that they don't provide. So in the long run, you may end up spending more money or being in a worse situation than if you had all the plans presented to you and someone without any incentive to promote one plan over another.
Now, how does having someone on your team with extensive government experience like you help your clients?
Well, the Medicare program, as I'm sure anybody listening to this podcast or watching this podcast knows, Medicare is a very complicated program. And there are hundreds of thousands of pages of regulations. The Medicare agency, CMS, employs over 6,000 people. So it takes a village to run a very complex program. And agents and brokers don't always have that breadth of experience. But again, because I've been working in this program for so long and I've had that time at the government, I not only know so many of the regs and the guidelines, but if I don't, I know where to find them. I know where to find the resources if there's a very unusual, arcane situation. But also, I understand the mindset of CMS. It's one thing to read regulations and interpret them, but there's another to know what goes on behind that. What are the policy decisions based on? And folks that haven't worked at CMS don't have that. They can read regs just as I can, but I've got sort of a deeper level of understanding of what the intent of the requirements are.
Now, how do you build trusting relationships with clients over time?
Well, it starts from the very first meeting. I've always felt, both in my consulting with Medicare Advantage plan work as well as my work with Medicare beneficiaries, the most important thing I can do is to listen. To listen to what somebody's concerns are, where their confusion is, what problem are they trying to solve. So I never come at a problem with, there's only one way to fix this and this is the right way. Every situation is different. So I listen to what their particulars are and start working within that. And I start explaining, here's what I'm hearing. Here's how that fits into the Medicare program, or here's what's going on. Here's how I suggest we proceed. And I look for feedback because I want my clients to feel comfortable with me. I want them to understand how I'm working with them and why I'm suggesting the things that I am. So it starts from that very first conversation. And I do work as a consultant, but I'm very conscious of people's budget. Seniors and the disabled, because Medicare is also for the disabled, often are on tight budgets. And I'm very cognizant of that. So I try to be as efficient as I can in terms of working with them and getting their problem resolved, while still, not shortchanging them, still kind of listening to their concerns and trying to address those. And I find that approach really works well in developing a strong, trustworthy relationship with my clients.
Okay. Moving on, I want to segue into basics and common misconceptions. What are the most common misconceptions people have about Medicare Advantage versus original Medicare?
Well, I have two thoughts on that. One of them is that very often when I'm talking about Medicare to folks, they have formed an opinion as to which path is better, the Medicare Advantage path or the original Medicare path. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all program. What's good for one person may not be good for another person. So I try to encourage people to be open-minded and to take their, to sort of block out the noise from others and look at their particular situation. When I talk to Medicare beneficiaries or read things online, often I see that once people are on Medicare, sometimes they'll think, oh, I'm a Medicare expert. For example, I am on the app Nextdoor.
Right.
And sometimes someone will ask the question, oh, I'm thinking about joining this Medicare Advantage plan or whatever the question may be. And there'll be 20 responses and, there's so much misinformation because, again, it's a very complex program. And what you may know in your situation is, a little piece of that, and it's how that little piece applies to you in your situation. Doesn't mean it applies to everyone. And there's just a lot of confusion, misinformation out there. So I think what I'd say is, in terms of misconceptions, block out the noise, depend on true experts, agents, brokers, me, information that comes directly from CMS, the Medicare agency.
Okay. Can you walk us through the timeline of Medicare enrollment for new beneficiaries?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about the process for when someone turns 65, because that's the vast majority of Medicare beneficiaries. Again, Medicare is also for those who have been receiving disability insurance for 2 years, but that's a smaller part of the Medicare population. So I'll speak directly to those who are turning 65. Your what is called the initial enrollment period to enroll into Medicare starts 3 months before the month of your 65th birthday and extends through 3 months after your 65th birthday. So it's actually a 7-month period. So if my birthday is in June, I can enroll into Medicare starting in March. So that would be March, April, May, then my birthday month of June, and then 3 months after, July, August, September. So March 1st through September 30th. I can sign up for Medicare Part A and B then. A note, if you sign up before your 65th birthday, so let's say you sign up March 1st, it doesn't mean you get benefits March 1st. It means they've got you in the system, but your benefits wouldn't actually start till the first day of the month of your 65th birthday. And then once you apply for Medicare Parts A and B, and actually I should note that the application process or the enrollment process is facilitated by the Social Security Administration, not CMS. So to get into Medicare, you're dealing with SSA. Once you're in Medicare, then you're dealing with CMS thereafter. So once SSA notifies you that you've got Medicare, you get your Medicare card. At that point, you can choose which path you're going to go on and whether you're going to enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan or you're going to stay in original Medicare, with your Part A and B, and probably pick up or enroll in a Medigap or Medicare supplement plan. And if you take prescription drugs, enroll in a Medicare Part D plan. I will advise you currently to apply as early as you can, because with the recent cuts in the federal government, there have been a number of cuts at SSA. It's taking a bit longer for them to process enrollments, and that has caused some problems for people. So my advice is apply as early as you can within that 7-month window.
Now, you mentioned Medigap, the supplement policy a little bit. So when should someone consider a Medigap policy instead of Advantage?
Well, I'm going to deflect that question a little bit
Okay.
because it really, again, everyone's situation is so different. It's not cut and dried like that. When I talk to a new client, I ask a lot of questions about their financial situation, about what providers not what providers they use, but how tied to their current providers are they, what special healthcare needs they may have. A lot of folks take, for example, very expensive drugs, and so that's a big consideration. Um, and also whether they're still working and covered by their employer. Are they retired, but they have retiree coverage in addition to Medicare? There are a lot of questions that will give me information to sort of know what they should consider as they're deciding whether to go into a Medicare Advantage or stay in original Medicare and get a Medigap plan. So I can't give you a straight answer there that would be helpful because it depends on so many factors.
Got it. Well, what advice would you give adult to children managing Medicare for parents?
Yeah, so I would say participate as much as you can early on in the process when they're learning about Medicare. So if your parent is speaking with a broker, an agent, and you can sit in on that call or that meeting, all the better. Or if I'm working with a new Medicare beneficiary, I ask, would you like, do you have an adult child or other helper that you would like to sit in on this? Or if someone's doing it on their own, a basic way to start is to read the Medicare and You Handbook. It's a booklet that CMS puts out every year, so they update it each year. And it gives the basics of the things you need to know about Medicare. So participating early means everybody's learning the process at the same time. It's harder when the Medicare beneficiary does it on their own, and then they may be fine initially or even for many years. But as they get older, things become a little bit harder to understand, or they may hit snags. And if the adult child comes in at that point, they're starting from scratch. They're starting from square one to learn the program. So it's really helpful to have everybody start on the same page at the very beginning and learn it together. The other piece of advice I would recommend is, to the extent you can, to review all the documents that the Medicare beneficiary gets, and there will be a lot of them, before the beneficiary makes a decision or wants to make a change in their Medicare. Beneficiaries get bombarded with information. It's very easy to get confused. And frankly, marketing by all the different health plans is very aggressive. So the more involved you can be in not only the decision-making process, but the information review process, I think leads to better outcomes in the end.
Okay, that's solid advice. Thank you very much. I want to talk about navigating plan selection now. What red flags do you see during plan comparison?
Oh, good question. What I would suggest, I guess you could call this a red flag, is when you are comparing, whether on your own, using an online tool, or with an agent or broker and the tools that they use, or even with me and the comparison tool that I use, drill down. You have to sort of narrow down your choices. Most people do, because many Medicare beneficiaries have multiple plan options out there. And here I'm talking more about Medicare Advantage than Medigap plans, because Medigap plans, the benefits are the same for each type of plan. But Medicare Advantage plans, each health plan can design its own benefits. So it's more confusing than Medicare Advantage. So you first have to narrow down the number of choices in a broad fashion, because if there are 15 Medicare Advantage plans available to you, you can't look at every last detail of 15 plans. It's overwhelming for anybody.
Right.
So you may think, well, I want a plan that has my providers, my doctors, my hospitals. And the agent or broker will be able to narrow that down for you, or I would. So you get to that point, but then read carefully, and especially for the benefits that you generally use. Again, if you use prescription drugs, you want to look at, are your drugs covered and what the cost sharing would be. If you get a lot of physical therapy, let's say you want to see what the physical therapy benefit is. So you want to look at those benefits that you currently use or you anticipate using a lot to make sure you understand what is covered, what is it going to cost me, how is this going to work for me?
Now, what role do client goals, such as financial, health related, play in your consultation?
100%. That's 100% of the role in my consultation. I'm here to serve you, the client, you, the beneficiary. And that's why I ask questions on, okay, what are you trying to achieve? What are your concerns? If financial concerns are the most important thing, that helps us focus and narrow down. If getting a particular drug covered, if you have a very high cost drug and that kind of runs your life because it's so expensive, then we focus on that and narrow down from there. So I take into account all the factors that someone considers the most important to them, and that's where we go. So my role is to listen to you, the client, 100% in terms of what you're looking for.
Great. What are the most common mistakes that families make when first approaching Medicare?
Well, there are a number of mistakes out there. I would say, again, listening to others, listening to other people on Medicare, friends, neighbors, and letting that guide your decision-making process. Again, this is a very complex program. I wouldn't have a 36-plus year career in it if it wasn't. So again, block out the noise. Other mistakes are maybe coming into the process already with a preconceived notion of which of those two paths to Medicare you're going to take.
Okay.
Oh, I hear terrible things about Medicare Advantage. I'm not going to go that route. Or, oh, going the original Medicare route and buying a Medicare supplement plan is so expensive. I don't think I can afford it. So therefore, I'm stuck with Medicare Advantage. Try to keep an open mind and listen to all the information that's presented to you. Again, whether it's by an agent or broker, by me, by another expert, or information you're getting directly from Medicare if you're doing it on your own.
Okay. I know that navigating all these plans is confusing, and some people might realize that they sign up for one plan and then they realize it's the wrong plan. So what should seniors do if they realize they chose the wrong plan after enrollment?
Yeah, good question. There are opportunities to change. It's not like you're locked in for life. However, there are very strict rules on when you can change and whether you can go from one path to the other. So meaning if you're in Medicare Advantage, whether you can go from that plan back to original Medicare or vice versa. Again, because the rules are complex and there are a number of different periods that allow you to change, I can't give sort of a quick and dirty answer here. But on a high level, I will say that the fall annual enrollment period, which is from October 15th through December 7th, does give you the opportunity to change. Change from one path of Medicare to the other, or from one Medicare Advantage plan to another. That's sort of it's called the annual enrollment period, but you can also think of it as the open enrollment period because that's when you can do almost anything in terms of changing. There's several other periods that will allow limited changes, and they are at different times of the year. So probably the best advice I can give is if you're in a plan and you're not happy, talk to an expert or go on to Medicare.gov, find the information on when is the next time that you can make the kind of change that you want to make.
Okay. Now, you've been working in this industry for a long, long time, and I'm sure there's a ton of success stories. Can you share a client success story where your guidance avoided a bad plan choice?
Well, what's hard to do is when I work with, it's hard to answer that directly because when somebody comes to me, they haven't made a choice yet. They're looking to make the choice. So I don't know, I don't have something to compare it to. If clients came and said, I'm ready to hit the button to join Aetna, for example, then I could say, well, let's look at your other options and, see if we find another plan. And, we found that maybe Cigna is better for you. But that's not how it really works. They come to me, confused. What are my options? And then we look at them. So it sort of harkens back to the point I made earlier, where if you're presented all of the choices available to you, which I can do, again, because I'm not an agent or broker, I'm not limited to a certain number of choices, you can feel confident that all the options that are available to you are being presented to you, and then we can narrow down based on your needs.
Okay, noted. Now, let's talk about denials and appeals. What are the typical triggers that lead clients to seek appeals for denied claims?
Well, I will say that there are a lot more denials that occur in the Medicare Advantage program than the original Medicare program. That's not to say that if you're an original Medicare, you won't get a denial. So let me explain sort of a little bit why there's such a difference. Under original Medicare, there are very few procedures or services that require prior authorization. Essentially, the way it works is you go to your doctor. If the doctor determines that you need a particular item, supply, procedure, what have you, they provide that, or they refer you to a specialist to provide it. You get the care, the provider submits the claim to Medicare, and Medicare will do what they call a medical necessity determination. Did this patient meet the needs? But the thing is that doctors are pretty savvy about the procedures they provide or refer for, and whether and how they're covered by Medicare. So I can't say it never happens that a doctor provides a service that isn't medically necessary, but it's not very common. So the vast majority of Medicare claims do get paid. Under Medicare Advantage, it's different. It's sort of the polar opposite. The vast majority of procedures do require prior authorization. So the doctor has to essentially ask for permission from the health plan to provide that service, or to get confirmation that it will be covered. And that's where many of the denials of Medicare happen, at the prior authorization process for Medicare Advantage. The other part is it gets denied on the back end. After the service has been provided, the claim gets denied. But again, since Medicare Advantage plans work on the system where they require prior authorization, authorization before you get the service, that's where you're more likely to get a denial. And once you get a denial, if you feel that that's wrong, that it should have been covered, or the procedure should have been approved, that's when you should seek an appeal.
How does the Medicare appeals process work? And where do most people get stuck?
Well, for Medicare Advantage, the process is a bit more complex. There are about 14 different iterations of the appeals process under Medicare Advantage. It varies by whether it's a medical service versus a prescription drug. If you're submitting an appeal under the standard timeframe process, or you're submitting it as an urgent appeal. There are special appeals processes if you think you're being discharged from the hospital too soon. These are just a few examples, but there are tweaks to the process for about 14 different situations that result in those tweaks. Then layered on top of that, for both Medicare Advantage and Original Medicare, there are 5 levels of the appeals process. So you first appeal to, in the case of Medicare Advantage, you first appeal to your health plan. If they uphold that, then you can appeal again, and that goes to what they call it's a third-party entity. It's called the independent review entity. And then if they still uphold the denial, you can go further from there, all the way up to an administration law judge. So it does get complicated, and I love working with folks who feel that they were denied wrongly, whether it's a denied prior authorization or a denied claim, and helping them through that process, because I have been through it a million times. I know the rules, they're complicated. Many people don't file an appeal at all, which is a shame, especially if you feel that you were wrongly denied. Those who do file an appeal, if that appeal at the first level is upheld, meaning the person reviewing the appeal says, nope, I think the denial was correct, many people will stop there. They won't take it to the next level. say a $200 claim, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah.
But if it's a $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 claim or a very needed procedure, it's absolutely worth taking it as far as you need to take it to try to get that overturned.
Yeah, 100%. How does plan appeal differ from filing a complaint with CMS or the ombudsman?
Question. So for appeals, what happens is you first file your appeal with the plan, as I said, the Medicare Advantage plan. Or if you're in original Medicare, you file it with the entity that reviews it for original Medicare. For grievances or complaints, things other than appeals, doesn't have to do with payment or providing a service, but let's say you feel you got bad care from a provider.
Okay.
If you're in Medicare Advantage, you first file that with the plan. And then if you need further help after that, you feel the health plan hasn't resolved your complaint, then you would call 1-800-Medicare. Under the original Medicare program, you would call 1-800-Medicare first. They would try to resolve your problem, your complaint, your issue. If they are unable to, then you would ask 1-800-Medicare to refer your complaint on to the Medicare ombudsman. So your first approach would be the health plan if you're in an MA plan, or 1-800 if you're in the original Medicare program. And then the next step, if you're in an MA plan, would be to go to 1-800-Medicare. And if you're in the original Medicare program, you would ask 1-800-Medicare to send the case to the ombudsman. So it's sort of a layered approach.
Right. Yeah, excellent. Now, how do you prioritize which denial cases to take on?
Again, on that initial call with somebody, listen to what their situation is. And if they're calling because they were denied something and they think that that was wrong, they want to file an appeal, I ask a lot of questions because, again, it's complex. So I want to make sure I understand the nuances and the details of their situation. And occasionally there will be a case where I feel like I don't think they have much of a case. I think the denial was probably appropriate. And I'll be honest, I'll tell them that. And I'll say, I can still work with you and try to do this, but I want you to be clear that I don't think there's a very good chance that you're going to get this overturned. That happens very rarely, but it does happen. Most of the time, if I feel that there's at least a fair chance that the denial was inappropriate, I will accept that case and work with the client.
What documentation or record keeping habits do you recommend to assist when a beneficiary needs to appeal a denial?
Oh, the best advice I can give is document, document, document. Document everything. Hold on to every piece of paper that you get. It will serve you so well if you need to appeal something. If folks can take notes on every conversation they have, they're like, if they're in the hospital, and this advice goes to both the Medicare beneficiary as well as their adult children or others who may be helping them. You know, if they're talking to a case manager in the hospital or a nurse or the doctor comes in or on phone calls, any discussions, document what is said, the date of the call, the names of the people you talked to, what they said. And as you get, you get a lot of letters with Medicare. You go in the hospital, you get a letter when you first go in, you get a letter when you're discharged, you may get letters in between giving important information. Keep all of that. You may not fully understand what they're for or are they important or not, but hold on to everything, because then as you're trying to work through an appeal, it's going to be so much stronger to say in that appeal, I spoke to Dr. So-and-so on May 7th, and this is what he said. But then on May 8th, the discharge planner said X, rather than saying, I don't feel I got very good information from my providers. I think they said blah, blah, blah. So that's the best advice that I can give is document everything.
Okay, great advice. Now, can you share an experience that was especially rewarding, like resolving a tough denial?
Yes. So this is an interesting case. It wasn't quite a denial per se, although it could have ended up being one. So I had a client who, she called me because her mother, so this was an adult child of a beneficiary. Her mother, who I think was 87 or so, had fallen and fractured her hip. And she was taken to the emergency room and evaluated. And they moved her upstairs to a bed. And the next day they came in and they said, that she's still considered an observation patient.
Okay.
She was not considered an inpatient yet. They hadn't formally admitted her to the hospital. And they were discussing her treatment plan. And they kept her overnight. And they came back to her room the next day and said, okay, now we're admitting you as an inpatient.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted for about a day and a half. And then someone else from the hospital came in the next day. No, we're actually putting you back on observation status. And she was left there for 3 days in observation status. So at this point, she'd been in the hospital about a week. The family was very frustrated with this. And I'll explain in a minute why this can make a big difference to the beneficiary and their family. So that's why they engaged me. They said they were very frustrated because the issue that the hospital caused by transferring them back and forth between inpatient status versus observation status was causing a big snag for the next level of care that she needed. They were going to be discharging the mother, but she needed skilled care. She needed physical therapy and some skilled nursing care. So the next step was for her to go to a skilled nursing facility. However, this beneficiary, who was on the original Medicare path with a Medicare supplement plan, under the original Medicare path, for Medicare to cover skilled nursing facility care, the beneficiary has to have been in an inpatient in a hospital for at least 3 days prior to going to the skilled nursing facility. Parenthetically, under Medicare Advantage, most Medicare Advantage plans waive that requirement, but those on original Medicare have to meet that requirement for Medicare to cover the skilled nursing care. Well, this family didn't have that situation because with the hospital flipping her back and forth between being an inpatient and being an observation patient, she didn't have a consecutive 3 days as an inpatient. And when they contacted me, I said, well, there are problems here. For one thing, you can't keep under Medicare rules, you can't keep a person in the hospital as an observation patient longer than 48 hours.
Okay.
And they had, and that was precluding this beneficiary from having that 3-day inpatient stay. So we arranged for me to speak with the hospital staff along with the beneficiary's family on a phone call. I explained who I was. I'm a former CMS regulator. I know the rules. I cited the regulations that they were violating. I said, this is a serious violation of these federal rules. I showed them to them on the screen. They stopped the call and said, we need to set up another call. We want to have our lawyers on the call. So I thought, when you bring lawyers into it, it's a sign that they're feeling a little worried.
Right.
Are we at risk here? And they were, because they weren't following the rules, and it was causing this big problem for the family that was going to have to pay out of pocket for the skilled nursing facility care. Well, that further call never happened because the family called and said the hospital came back and they were changing the status, and other than the initial, I think it was 18 hours or something, the mother's initial 18 hours in the hospital, they were leaving as observation, but the rest of the stay they were categorizing as inpatient. So that's sort of, it's not a denial per se, but it sort of would have led to a denial of the skilled nursing facility care. But it's a sign of how having that deep Medicare experience, of how being a former Medicare regulator can really impact decisions. I don't know if the hospital felt like, oh, she's going to go report us to Medicare, or, we could get a lawsuit, or she could report it to the congressperson, which sometimes is an avenue. But whatever it was, they were worried enough that they thought, let's do the right thing here and follow the rules and settle this person's issue.
Yeah, this is an example of just knowing your stuff is very powerful. And I love that example. Thank you very much for sharing that. Let's segue into support for caregivers and families. So What Medicare pitfalls do caregivers frequently overlook?
Well, it's so hard with the Medicare program for everybody involved with the patient to know how Medicare works and what the rules are and what's covered. It's hard to say because, again, each person's situation and needs and medical conditions are different and
Hmm.
how that is impacted by Medicare. In general, I would say the more educated on Medicare a caregiver can be, the better. And I don't mean, go take a class on Medicare or
Yeah.
have it be your bedside reading for the next month, but to try to do a little bit of background reading, especially if you're taking care of somebody with a particular medical need. You might sort of research, well, how does Medicare deal with this? That's probably the best advice I could give. But again, it's hard for everybody to know everything about, nobody knows everything about Medicare, even me. I know a lot, but it's just too complex for everybody to know everything.
Well, how can families advocate during urgent health events when decisions need to be made?
Oh, good question. And it's hard. That's a problem that's not easily solved because when somebody's got an urgent medical condition, first of all, emotions are running high.
Hmm.
Everybody's worried and upset about the medical condition. And at the same time, where emotions are elevated, someone's medical situation may be precarious, you're being thrown all this information by the hospital or the doctors or whoever you're dealing with.
Hmm.
It's a lot to take in. So I wish more people knew that there are patient advocates out there. It's not a new service and it's growing, but
Hmm.
it's still, I would say, in kind of its toddler stages, if you will. And patient advocates can be really helpful with that. And by the way, I'm as you mentioned, I'm a board certified patient advocate,
Right.
but I specialize in Medicare and the rules of Medicare and how it impacts beneficiaries. But
Right.
there are other types of patient advocates. There are people that will help manage the care. If you feel like someone's in the hospital and the care manager in the hospital isn't taking all the needs into account, you can hire a patient advocate who does that same role but will advocate for the patient. They're all different kinds of patient advocates. So I think if more people knew that they're out there, they could engage them in these kind of urgent, very stressful situations to help them navigate that. Short of that, I guess what I'd say is, try to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
If you can, use the internet to
Yeah.
research what you can to find out as much information to sort of help your situation. But I will admit that your question is a good one. It's a very difficult situation to navigate.
And what resources beyond your services should listeners and viewers of this episode know about?
Oh, well, there are actually a lot of resources out there. And many Medicare beneficiaries and their families don't know about them. So thank you for asking the question. It gives me a chance to sort of let people know. Um, Probably number one is set up an account on Medicare.gov. Every Medicare beneficiary can set up an account there. It will
Mhm.
keep track of your claims, when you enrolled, all sorts of information about you as it pertains to the Medicare program. And there are other resources and tools on Medicare.gov that are helpful as well. Lots of written information.
Okay.
Earlier, I mentioned the Medicare and You handbook. That is
Right.
there, but as well as lots of specific booklets and information. So, for example, if you're still working after 65, there's a great booklet that gives lots of information on how that impacts your Medicare and what your choices are. Or if you have special needs, what
Okay.
options are available. Another tool on Medicare.gov that I strongly promote is there's a plan comparison tool. That's what I use when I'm helping somebody choose a health plan,
Okay.
where it lays out all your plans. But beyond that, there are also entities, they're called high cap entities, health insurance counseling advocacy program, I think.
Okay.
Every state has one, and there are counselors there that help you with Medicare issues.
Okay. Now, how do you stay current with constantly evolving Medicare rules and benefits?
Wow, which there are many. Well, I'm on a mailing list, a CMS mailing list, where I get numerous emails that have new policy guidance, new manuals. They talk about new regulations. So I'm tied in directly into CMS and what they issue, which is my primary focus.
Yeah.
I also, because this is my business, read tons of healthcare news out there. There's so many different outlets that focus on what's happening in the healthcare field. So I'm constantly reading news about that. Also, just speaking to my former friends my friends at CMS that are still there, sort of getting the inside scoop on what's happening. So those are the main ways that I stay current.
And looking ahead, what trends are you watching in Medicare and how will they affect families?
One thing I would love to point out is that there will likely be some pretty significant changes to benefits exclusively for Medicare Advantage plans. This fall, when there's the annual enrollment period, Medicare Advantage plans will be sending out to their members talking about what the changes are for the next year. They send that out every fall. I know a lot of Medicare beneficiaries ignore it. Read that letter, please. It's really important to know what's changing. And due to some changes that happened this year, it actually is going to affect what Medicare Advantage plans decide to cover in 2026.
Mhm.
And if you don't read that letter and you don't make a change to a plan, all of a sudden next year you may need a benefit or a prescription drug or something. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, last time it cost me $10 and now it's costing me $100 or whatever. So there are going to be some noticeable changes to benefits in Medicare Advantage. I don't foresee any big changes in the coming year to the Medicare program in general coming from the current administration, nothing significant. However, as we know, things are a little unpredictable right now.
Right.
So never say never.
Right.
But right now, they're trying not to make big changes to Medicare because, frankly, the senior population is a very strong voting bloc. And there are very strong lobbies out there, AARP and others. And Medicare is kind of considered the third rail, like you don't touch Medicare. So at least for the foreseeable future, I don't think there'll be any big changes. But never say never.
Right. Now, as we come to a close on this episode, what's a simple tip that every listener or viewer can apply this week to better manage their benefits?
Just educate yourself as much as you can. Understand this is a complex program. And I hope folks don't feel like, oh, I'm so confused and I'm the only one. I'm sure everyone else gets this program. Everybody gets confused by this. My brother, who's an MIT PhD economist, when he turned 65, he was confused by it. I thought if he's confused by it, everybody must be confused by it. It is a complex program. Be patient with yourself, reach out for help, and just educate yourself as much as you can. The more information you have, it mitigates, I can't say minimizes, but it mitigates the problems you might have with Medicare down the road.
Yeah. And lastly, how can people get in touch with you if they have any questions? And what are your first step recommendations?
Yeah, I would say go to my website. It's fairly simple. It's Mason Medicare, all one word, .com. So lots of information on what I do, how I can help. There's even a button that you can book a free half-hour call with me. So that's how you can get in touch with me. I would say just be prepared for me to ask a lot of questions. As I mentioned before, the more information I have on your particular needs, your particular situation, the better I'll be able to describe how I might be able to help you. And in terms of first steps about entering the Medicare program, whether you're entering it through disability or through turning 65, read a bit up on it. Even if you're going to reach out for help to me, to an agent broker, to HICAP, whoever, do a little bit of reading beforehand to give yourself a little bit of understanding prior to reaching out for help. And whatever help you get probably will have a little more context if you've done at least a little bit of orientation on the Medicare program.
Excellent. Julie, thank you so much for being here and shedding light on such a confusing topic. Your depth of experience and passion for helping seniors and their families really come through. And I especially appreciate the way you empower people to make competent decisions, not just with Medicare plans, but with their overall well-being in mind. And your work is so important, and I'm grateful we had this conversation. And for those of you watching, if your loved one is considering senior living and you need to figure out what to do with their home, let's talk. Schedule a free consultation with me by clicking on the Calendly link located in the video description box for this episode on YouTube. You can learn more about my services at www.simplifyseniortransitions.com. Have a quick question, DM me on Instagram at soldbydale. And don't forget to check out other episodes of the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast for more expert interviews like this one. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you love to listen. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this information. Thanks for tuning in. Julie, one last thank you for being on the episode today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
You're so welcome. And for everyone else, I'll see you on the next episode of the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast.